Hi, I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Hello, Moon to Moon. I'm so excited to be sharing with you this conversation with one of my favorite mystical teachers, Danica Boyce. Danica and I share how we've known each other many years now, and we talk a lot about her very, very, very cool, unique, transformational, and just all around wildly potent, so glad it's here on this planet Earth, offering abundance paganism. I just thought abundance paganism was absolutely genius. From the moment she announced it and held the promo, I was salivating. This was 2021. Just the way she was weaving together her long devotion to teaching about animist folk traditions that are still alive and emergent around the world, but especially in Europe. The way she began to weave that with abundance, theory, philosophy, ritual, frequency was just so big for me. I wanted that class to exist before it did exist. So the moment she started speaking about it, it was oh, there's that thing that I wanted, Instant sign up for me. So I was so excited to see that she's putting it back out again because it's been a couple of years, and I just get so excited when human beings are really delivering such unique genius. Danica doesn't everything that she offers. She's just such a treasure of a human being. Just so in herself and in her Danica voice, I just get so excited when I see this in the world. And this is just a really unique offering. So this year's Abundance Paganism is running July, August, and I think into September a little bit too. We talk about the dates inside. I have the link for you to go check everything out. And the deadline to sign up, now I'm I should have probably looked that up before I started recording. The deadline to sign up is, let's see, I think it's July 1st or June 30th. It's through the end of the month, but maybe the very beginning of July you can still sneak in. It's just so great. So very much encouraging you, if this conversation is speaking to you, it's a little bit time sensitive to get over and check out the website, read all about it. It's a mostly self-paced offering, which is great for summertime. But there are a couple of live meetups that you can make if you feel a craving to hang out with Danica and ask her questions. Yes, it has 7 40 to 60-minute audio lectures between, here it is, July 1st and August 26th via private podcast, which will be available till October 1st. There's 6 sets of self-led activities and readings to accompany the lectures. I just loved these so much. There's 6 guided meditations for integration. Don't miss those. I really loved those. And then there's 2 live discussion and Q&A calls with Danica. There's a private Discord server for people to discuss and connect. She has this wonderful people in her community because everybody's constellating around her big bright spirit, big Sagittarius sun spirit. And then, I mean, she gives so many resources. Like, it's like got that academic side to it of somebody who's like, and here's my bibliography delivered. So yeah, let me read Danica's bio so we can so you can learn a little bit more about Danica before the conversation. Danica Boyce is a writer, educator, and researcher in vernacular, spirituality, folklore, and song. She is called to labor at the dream of undoing the wounds of imperialism by sowing love and connection to the living world. She has a master's in medieval studies, a BA in English literature, and a Bachelor of Education in which she focused on Indigenous pedagogies. For the past 9 years, she's been producing the popular Fair Folk podcast. So Moon to Moon listeners, some of y'all may be fans of Fair Folk already. That's how I found Danica's work, is through Fair Folk, which is a research-based show making information about traditional cultures of Europe available to folks around the world. Since she began the podcast years ago, she has built this pagan research, practice, and sharing into a rewarding career. So the links will be in the show notes for you to connect with information about abundance paganism, to connect with Danica's writings. She's an amazing writer. Her Substack writings are wonderful. Like, I really cannot emphasize enough how glorious it is to be connected to the making of words in Danica's mind. She's also going to have an Abundance Paganism mini course that'll be for free later in July. So listeners, if you miss the opportunity to get into the big course, you might still be able to get the free mini course. And then there's also a link for Danica's Instagram. She will get on and say these reels when she feels them, and they're just so heart-led, but also so true and honest, and they can be uncomfortable because she's coming from that place of like, this is what is true to me, even if it's not fashionable necessarily, you know? And y'all know that that's how I really like vibe. So yeah, without further ado, then, I'm going to invite you into this conversation with the wondrous Danica Boyce. Thank you, Danica. Welcome back to Moon, Danica Boyce.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be here.
You were previously here for Living the Fuck Out of Your Chart with Danica Boyce. It was like August of 2022, I think. Maybe 2021.
I think it was 2022. I can picture where I was, and I was house sitting. Wait, maybe it was 2021. Yes.
It's been a while. I'll pull it up and link it in the show notes because that was a really fun one. And I feel like if listeners really resonate with this conversation, there's probably little nuggets back in that one that will kind of create a bridge that will be really fun. But yeah, thank you for coming back. I've known you a while now.
Isn't it wild? When I think of who you are in my life, I think of us having this really vibrant, sort of giggly sisterhood based in like big visions and not holding back on life, you know? And I hope that comes through for folks in this chat, that they can feel that a part of that we circle, you know.
To be true, I do feel like we probably we're good friends in past lives.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I really can't remember how I connected to your work, but I started to be a listener of Fair Folk for a good year. And then you began to speak about abundance paganism, which is our big topic for today. But I would love to ground listeners in Fair Folk. Like, how do you describe this project? And when did it start? And that will help bridge us to some of the next topics.
Totally. Well, Fairfolk podcast is a a container for the research that flows out of me naturally, where I'm always really wanting to learn more about how to connect with the traditions that our ancestors would have known. Specifically, many of my ancestors and just my interest lies in Northern Europe and the folk songs and the mythology and the spiritual practices that we, kind of imagine somehow we're lost or we don't hear about growing up as I did in North America, but are still many of them living and are also quite well documented and have these amazing keys to reclaiming a sense of indigeneity and belonging to the earth and to one another and to the sacredness of the world. And so I was just doing all this digging, trying to find my own way back to a sense of the center of things. And I just started sharing it on like a local radio station, like one of those community stations where everybody can have a show. And then quickly it occurred to me that I should make it into a podcast. And at that time, there were very few folklore podcasts. I knew of two. And so it was kind of this incredible match where many people were looking for that kind of information. And I was just sort of blithely, naively sharing it, not realizing how many other people would also resonate with this stuff. And so just over the many years I've been doing it, it's sort of flowered into a much more sort of personally identified project where it used to be more academic, more trying to be objective. And now I talk a lot more in the midst of the research and sharing about how I apply these things and how they can create a container for a worldview, a way of being, or many, multiple, of course. So that's the story of fair folk songs, mythology, paganism, folklore, me talking a lot to people. Sometimes field research into folk song and paganism in different areas of Europe.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know that I've shared with you that when I was a kid, my grandfather was feeling a loss in terms of not really his parents who had immigrated from Sweden, and my grandmother also had their parents had all immigrated from Sweden, but they only spoke English, and there was this kind of sense of detachment from roots. My grandfather was very involved in the Swedish community, Swedish American community in Minnesota. And there are these language camps, the Concordia language villages, up in the woods of Minnesota. And there was a camp for Swedish language where you go and you get a passport and a new name. And you, like the activities that you do them in Swedish, and you do Swedish activities. So they had like weaving and dalmålning, the painting, and there's all singing, learning all these old folk songs. We eat Swedish food. It's like just like nerding out on heritage. And then I was so taken by like celebrating the holidays and celebrate like the experiential quality of this immersion that I started to go to the French camp because that's what I was taking in school. And I knew from a young age, I'm going to live in France one day, just like kind of in a mystical way. So then I started to go to that camp too, because we were going up to Minnesota to see my family. So we would go to these overnight camps. And then I ended up working at Lac du Bois, the French camp, and everything is like singing, like group song with campfires. And it was such a captivating experience being in the woods next to the water, singing. The French camp didn't have electricity in the cabins. So it was very uh, like the experience of like loons at night and the atmospheric quality of it just like really took me to places that I think is very much a part of the way I live my life now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think for when I found Fair Folk, I felt like I was like it really activated this magical child inside of me that was like, this is where I'm from. Like, I'm from this, whatever this is, even though it's like false, it's not, it doesn't feel false when I'm singing in group around this campfire. It doesn't feel like a pretend thing. There is a kind of melancholy around the separation from the place or to some idea of a life, but it's also so alive. So I'm just curious if anything I just said brings up anything in you about some of your projects and things like that.
So what resonates with me about what you just said is this idea of there being a sense of like this is my home or this calls to me, like you said about like just kind of knowing that you're going to live in France one day for one, and then also like the songs together and the loons at night. And like one of the big ideas of this idea of abundance paganism, one of the big animating features of, and it's just a way of talking about a particular kind of approach to life. Like I don't own this idea of abundance paganism. I have a course called that, but like it's something that anybody can have or do. And one of the main things that we do in embodying this way of being is noticing the places in the world, the things that we encounter that light up for us and tell us something about where we belong, that tell us something about our destiny, and like taking those things that inspire us, that make us feel almost like we're sparkling in our bodies, or sometimes it makes you want to cry, or it makes you feel safe or grounded, like you have a strong reaction in your being. And this often happens when you're younger. You might remember these things. And instead of ignoring them and thinking of them as fanciful or strange, taking them as compass points, as a map to your own destiny. And I think of destiny as something that's within your control, that you have certain callings, that you have a certain sense of like what could be for you, maybe even across lifetimes, and that the invitation is always sounding in the world and in your body. And so when I think of destiny, I think of it being, yeah, stored in that resonance between you and these experiences. And they're often early experiences because it's before we started tuning that out, which many of us have to do to get by in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. I love to hear this resonance that you had, and how it brought you to Fairfolk too. That's such a gift to think that like my work could resonate with that part of you.
Yeah, at the Swedish camp called Sjölunden, they all mean Lake of the Woods. We would celebrate Midsummer and we would celebrate Santa Lucia Day, and we would do these very evocative, colorful, song-based rituals that that eventually led me at midlife. Like that was not just a fanciful child activity. Like Midsummer exists in me still, and I can craft a life that's leading me towards that. So yeah, then you started articulating in Fair Folk about this new course and this new framework, really, abundance paganism. And so, yeah, I would love to know just how that started to constellate into form for you.
It's kind of wild. I mean, as many things all coming together, I feel like I remember actually the day that I thought of those words together, I was in the bathtub, and it was in 2020, and I was spending a lot of time in the bathtub because it was 2020. And I had a lot of time to be in the bath. And it had been Okay. So the years previous, I had done a master's of medieval studies. I'd been doing a lot of research into the history of Catholicism and how it's related to oppression and othering and racism, and how folklore ties all those things together. How it's like we can make folklore of any kind. We can make really generative, beautiful folklore that connects us to people, and we can make folklore that's anti-Semitic, which is what I was studying in the Middle Ages. And it's just like twisted and ugly and has these mechanics of separation and fear and othering at its root. And so I was learning about that kind of folklore in my master's degree. And then I became a school teacher. I went and studied to become a school teacher. And so then I was learning all about how there's this idea that is animating more progressive models of education right now, that no children are bad, that if you just take for granted that all children are doing their best to flourish, and everything that they're doing that might be antisocial is actually just a means of trying to adapt to their context, and means that they need more help, they need more love, that we should never dispose of a person because they're not doing what we want. It's this really like abundant, generous way of viewing people. And then I did this special focus in the program, the education program, that was based on Indigenous teaching, Indigenous pedagogies. And most of the teaching from these Indigenous teachers that I had was based in story, was based in ceremony, and was based in song. It was all experiential, and it was all incredibly affirmative. It wasn't about like correcting or shaping or training people. It was about emphasizing and bringing out what was naturally beautiful and connecting about them. And that blew my mind. And also I saw the way that cultural revival in Indigenous cultures is basically like what could save the world. They're the people who are still living in ways that are actually affirmative of life, and are building rather than tearing down. And so I started feeling after this program, this longing for that for my people, because of course I can't just go join an Indigenous tribe and happily ever after. And even if I could, the rest of us can't, those of us who have been disconnected from traditional culture. And for me, that's like European cultures, but it could be anything, really, anybody who's feeling disconnected from traditional culture. And so I'd been spinning that around in my mind. And that's when I started Fair Folk, doing all this research, trying to like resource myself again with this culture that I and many other people have lost. And then I was trying to make a living from this podcast. And so one day I hired a business coach, Aislinn Walton, who we have in common, I believe. And she said to me, Danica, you've been making this podcast for free for years. And yeah, you have a Patreon, but it's like a pretty minimal thing. And you're a teacher and you're well educated and you know how to research. Have you ever thought about teaching an online course? I think the word she said was, "You're sitting on a gold mine." And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I just hadn't, I'd been like affirming other people, thinking about how the world is full of, abundance, and these children are perfect as they are, and nature is amazing. But it hadn't occurred to me really until around that time that like I was also amazing, and that like people might want to pay me for my special insight and research that I've done in the world, as everybody deserves to be compensated for their special insight, So, yeah, I was reading a lot of self-help books about abundance orientation, being like, how come I, have all of these skills and make no money? What's going on? And so the word abundance came into my field through self-help books, like You're a Badass by Jen Sincero is one of the big ones. And so many things had never occurred to me about how I was imagining the world through this self-limiting belief lens. And as I was going through these materials of self-help and abundance orientation, abundance mindset, I started to see how they connected with both the Indigenous traditions that I encountered in my teaching program and other research in university, and also the folklore of Northern Europe and of Europe in general, where I discovered like almost every big festival, the biggest festivals that we have are actually these future-oriented, like manifestation-based magical invocations of abundance. Like almost everything is about abundance, you know? It's not greedy to be like looking forward to when we're going to have a harvest so we can all celebrate, and celebrating that in advance and invoking the beauty and the wonder of the earth. Like, for some reason, we've developed this idea that like, large corporations, governments, evil people are allowed to have lots of money and a really good time, but the rest of us, we have to earn it through like suffering and self-punishment, and that's a really Christian idea, and in an imperialist Christian way. Not that there's anything wrong with Christianity in general, but this idea that we're fallen and that we inherit a fallen earth that we're just trying to escape from. And that's one of the poisonous ideas that disempowers almost everybody and disconnects us from our traditional cultures and our birthright to feel at home on the earth and to celebrate and to be well and to flourish and to share and receive, So all of these ideas were swimming around for me. And I realized that, yeah, this abundance idea is central to flourishing, to nourishing traditional cultures that we've lost, And it's not just about money, it's about this whole other way of being that's affirmative and accepts things as they are and says, what's here is enough, and we're enough, we're more than enough, we're overflowing with enoughness. It's just how we're seeing things that's causing this disconnect and this suffering, this needless suffering. So that's abundance paganism, trying to revive European traditional cultures and ways of seeing the world as imbued with spirit through an abundance orientation.
Yum. How do you, thank you, by the way.
That wasn't overwhelming.
I'm obsessed with like synthesis. It's just the coolest.
Yes.
It's the coolest thing. So I love feeling how like, because I did this one thing, like I learned these things, and then I had this other, like that's how something so unique can come into form. Is it's just like braiding all of these different parts of you that you're noticing into something that is really unique. I mean, there's something really unique about this project. I'm curious how you would define paganisms, because I do think it's a word that can sometimes someone might presume what it means, and it's not really what you mean. So yeah, what's your latest way of describing paganism?
It's a really great question. And it's a complicated word. I admit that it could really be off-putting, especially when a lot of us grew up. If you look up, for example, in Word Hippo, in any thesaurus, what pagan means, it will mean unruly, brutal, evil, bad, uncivilized, cruel, ignorant. It's like, you can tell that we live in a culture that has demonized anything that's not Christianity, because if you look up Christian, you get the opposite. You get good, kind, generous, grounded, civilized, etc. So there's just been a wild project on behalf of certain religious bodies, and not all, to demonize and other non-Christian traditional ways of being and religious or spiritual perceptions of the world. And so that's basically Indigenous peoples of the world. And we don't now think of Europeans as Indigenous peoples, but there are still Indigenous peoples living in Europe, for one. And Europeans only stopped being Indigenous because they've internalized this idea of us versus them, the institutional religion being universally right and objective, and all other ways being basically evil and ignorant. And so it is a term that originated to mean an ignorant country dweller, a bumpkin, a redneck, like heathens is the same meaning. It means like heath dweller, it means country dweller. So it was a derogatory term for everybody that hadn't adopted this new religion in ancient Rome. And it wasn't nice. But when it comes to, so for me, it's purely practical. It's a term that folks would recognize as meaning pre-Christian European spiritual ways. But it can mean anything, really. Like, I don't think it's mutually exclusive with Christianity. It's only that one narrow worldview that has made it so. Do you know what I mean? Like, pagans could happily practice Christianity in the period when Christianity was young. It's only became when it was this huge imperial world-spanning religion that those things came to be seen as mutually exclusive, that you weren't allowed to do anything else except for what the Church of Rome told you was legitimate religious practice. So there is a lot of spikiness in the history of it, but just basically it's pragmatic. Like, it means European pre-Christian traditions, but I don't think that they also ended when Christianity began. It's like the definition would be like seasonal celebrations, so, like folk magic and animism and polytheism, if that's somewhere on the spectrum that you land. Like, I know that's a huge thing to go into, but animacy, believing that the world is alive and that different, what we would think of as inanimate things, have life and consciousness of some kind, to the idea of like multiple gods that maybe, look like humans or something. There's a whole spectrum there, and they're closely related, these ideas of the world being alive and us not being the only meaningful beings on it. So yeah, those are some of the ideas that typify paganism, but also indigenous traditions worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like using the word too here because it's standing in the face of the history of that word, since what it feels like that you're doing here is a very openly decolonial project.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel true?
Yeah. And I guess in some ways, I like the idea of reclaiming it, like being like, there was never anything wrong with being pagan. It's really just everybody's natural state. We don't have to fix it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so then when you put when it feels true to me that um like what comes through in the teachings since I've taken the class.
Yeah.
I've been a part of it. I think it was the first iteration, but it may have been the second. Um, what comes through is like just the thesis that paganism is abundance. This is what it felt like to me.
Mm.
Like the word up front is important to help kind of signal the doorway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I found myself at a time of life of just really wanting to trust in what felt to me like the inherent generosity of my own spirit and of aliveness.
Mm.
And like where can I get support for that in what also feels true to me about the animated world and the way that I'm engaging with it here at midlife and my mystical midlife, I like to say. And through the experience of the teachings, just really feeling so fortified in the inherent abundance to the way we really naturally are is what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. My sense is that, like, yeah, we don't have to convert, we don't have to fix ourselves. In fact, like the things that we tend to imagine as the weakest links in our being are often quite the opposite. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking this morning about Achilles' heels and like strong feelings. And I'm somebody who has like one of those deep feeling people. And my whole life I've thought this was like a problem. Do you know that I'll cry and cry, or I'll become so excited that it overwhelms people, or I talk like right now I'm talking so much, and that was like an issue, or I thought it was a problem. But if I actually didn't think it was a problem, wouldn't it be just a powerful thing that's a part of me? Like, don't I just have powers, not just powerful feelings that are like somehow like a problem or beyond me? They're actually my source. They're like my connection to the power of life, to like the very ocean and its waves and the currents and tides. And isn't that unbelievably amazing? What if I believed in that, you know? And I really appreciate that you resonate with that, that we're, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like a mindset switch that's like so simple, but also like really quite difficult sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, your teachings around this really helped me come into my relationship with Jupiter as
Oh,
abundance.
yes. Yes,
Um,
please tell me about it.
well, and also unshaming as like unshaming what is clearly abundant here, right? And each
Yes.
sign has a thing that
Hmm.
is inherently abundant, but we've been taught to shame that. So like Gemini might be being distracted by the next thing that you're curious about, and that being a real problem to maybe in the school system that you were in.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for what you just described, it feels um, like unshaming Scorpio or unshaming the water signs. Like that
Yeah.
means what they're here abundantly to they move through us this way is what it feels like. And
Hmm.
so it feels like I'm seeing here how your like some of the portals you opened for me allowed me to access the that whole world that I've been teaching in the last few years, you
It's
know? Because
incredible.
unshaming seems so connected to this idea of what if it's not a problem, you know?
Yeah. It's such a generative question. I've loved that series so much. It has like completely fed me whenever I encounter your Unshaming the Signs posts and writings and work. It's like it really blows my mind. And I just love that again, there's this idea that like you don't have to do everything. You don't have to solve a problem. You just need to like open a door and then let everybody and everything walk through it. Do you know? We're trying too hard.
We're trying too hard. We sweet humans.
We're doing our best. We have so
We
much to give.
are. It's so moving that you said that because I was a teacher in my early 20s and I was sent to a middle conference for middle school teachers. And I was completely hooked by this woman whose thesis is every child is doing the very best they can. And you know,
Yeah.
these people in the room are like, but what about that kid that did it? You know, and
Yeah.
I just knew she was right. You know, it was like they can disagree, but that feels true to me.
Yes. I guess the real test is applying that to the political landscape.
Yes.
It's not a test. I mean, it's just a challenge. It's like a spiritual challenge. I mean, every major tradition has been like, but can you forgive the most evil man? You know, like it's like that's your challenge this life. Like, can you go extreme? Can you go huge with your acceptance? Like, and you don't have to all the time, but it's a fun exercise. Like if you can do that, if you can like look with empathy, even pity on the people who are wreaking havoc through their disconnection, then you can square anything. You know?
It really is true. And it is, I think, uh, a powerful, almost like going to the gym for your imagination. Like, because I was taken with um in one of my containers, we're reading this incredible book called The Speech of the Grail. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't. Exciting.
It's I mean, I read it annually. It's a journey towards speaking that heals and transforms, and it's looking at a particular version of the Percival myth.
Mhm.
So there's this one section we were just discussing it a week or so ago, and Gowan, who's like a alter ego in the story for Percival, like Gawain,
Mhm.
comes back to the community changed. And there's this like great display of his differentness to the community. And some of the community members are grumbling because they're like, give me a break, like they're annoyed basically at his strangeness. And Sussman, the writer, was looking at how sometimes we forget the play and display, A, and part two, looking at how that's like a discuss. It's really like an internal community. Like you can think of it as an outside community, and you can think of it as your internal community, and how when we cultivate new ways of being, we're bringing a strangeness to the community within. But
Yeah.
this helps with differentiation and ultimately expanding your own inner community.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how, like, looking at LA and the protests and the ice, and you could almost see that as like an internal theater. I mean, obviously, it's happening for real in the outer
Yes.
world, but a lot of these pieces are internal, and like, what kind of relationship do we have with like the police in our own heads, the ice in
Oh
our own
yeah.
psyche,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
relating to those parts of us is like, is hard, but that confrontation creates expansiveness because it takes imagination, I think, to speak to those parts of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like the way that we treat ourselves internally is in strong resonance with the way that we behave in the world. And even though we are often more self-sacrificing than like we're not as likely to do violence to other people as we are to our own psyche, I think. But the two are definitely in close contact, and it is really it's not like it's good for us to be harming ourselves but being nice to others on the outside. Do you know, like we will be of so much greater service when we're also actually, firing the police in our heads, replacing them with helpful counselors,
Yes.
maybe some
And like,
matriarchs.
um dance, like, may the liberatory force inside be one that's dancing, like
Yeah.
um yeah, so I'm linking us back. um yeah, it feels like there's a real spirit of decoloniality in abundance paganism, but it doesn't feel like the drudgery that sometimes resistance can feel like.
But I don't think of it as resistance. I actually balk whenever someone uses the word resistance. I'm like, no, 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 that's not what we're doing. Like, if you
Yes,
there's this
speak to
metaphor or
this.
something. If you put like, what is it? There someone was describing the way that protesters, oh, I wish I could remember exactly, but protesters resisting the police at a protest, for example, if they have like a barrier and they push against the barrier, that actually makes the police stronger. So if you're like actively resisting, if you're trying to stand up against something using brute force or trying to overpower, that actually gives power to the thing that you're trying to resist, which also works with like neuroplasticity. Like the more that you try to resist a thought, the more you have the thought and you solidify that neural pathway, which is like frustrating, but also it shows you that like what you need to do instead is like step into the slipstream and let yourself be like taken along, and then you leverage the force that's already being exerted, that already exists, it's already there, and you're able to like in a limber way kind of redirect it through your gentleness and through your going with the flow ness, finding the bright thing to go towards as opposed to trying to stem the tide, which is just impossible basically. Like and maybe that's kind of a weird mixed metaphor, but I just don't think resistance, and this is my take on this is my take on politics, and it is like it does get me into a lot of hot water with activists. Like people don't like that word, and I totally understand. Like if someone is trying to harm you, self-defense is real and good and important. And like, I don't mean this on the in the ground kind of way, like resistance is a part of our experience and is necessary, but on that more global kind of like energetic scale, I do think that if we're playing whack-a-mole with the bad guys, we're wasting our time. And we could be much more powerful if we're building towards positive momentum as opposed to simply trying to stop what's wrong, do you know? And then invoking or recruiting the bad guys to our cause because it's way more fun and it's going somewhere, you know?
Yes, exactly. Yes, this is where the fun is being had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that because I feel like it was maybe you that started kind of clearing some distortion around the word resistance for me that was like, yes, yes, yes. That felt really good hearing you speak of it. And also I remember now that it was really helpful once you made a reel on like deeper than patriarchy. I'm a
Oh,
chronic
yeah.
mispronouncer. Is it patriarchy or
I think
patriarchy?
I think it totally depends, actually. I bet
Okay.
patriarchy is the more correct Latinate way to do it. So
Okay.
go for it.
Um, the deeper wound is scarcity, and that was really helpful. I don't know if you want to speak on that a little.
Totally. I remember making that reel. I was standing under a tree and I was like nearly shaking. It might have been the first reel I ever made. I'm not sure. I was like, people are gonna hate this. And I still know it's true. And so I was like, yeah, it was basically like patriarchy isn't the problem, or at least it's not the root of the problem. Obviously, it's a problem, but like the real problem that we need to be addressing is what makes us all think that we're in competition in the first place. It's just like the one Hydra head. Do you know what I mean? Like we'll find some other way to think that we're opposite and other and fighting over the scraps. If it isn't patriarchy, it'll be race. And if it isn't race, it's like something else, like you have brown hair and I have blonde. I don't actually have blonde hair, but um yeah, it's that's the root. That's the problem is that we're motivated by fear and we're convinced by our culture that that's a problem that like we'll have till our death, that it's human nature to fight for survival and that somehow by cutting down everything around us that's living we will thrive. Like the logic is fucking terrible. But it is the logic of Western imperialist capitalism, basically, that we're fighting over the scraps. And there's enough philosophy and enough, so many people take it for granted that that's how life works. Like almost all economic theory, at least the stuff that anyone's using in practice, is based on this idea that we need to perpetuate scarcity to make value. And it's the complete opposite, do you know? What about recognizing value? What about like multiplying fractally the potentialities that exist between the things that we're so, taking for granted as what's here, and possible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is so funny that that was your experience of making that reel. I remember where I was standing when I was watching it, and I was like, fuck yeah, Danica's onto it.
Thank you very much. The
Yeah.
internet's gotten less aggressive in the last couple of years, I've noticed actually. It used to be people used to be outraged that you would say something that they disagreed with. Now I think people have gotten the memo and they just unfollow you. Now it's much more peaceful.
That's so interesting you say that because I was just remarking that to my boyfriend Matt that some posts that I put out 2 years ago from the Unshaming series that were
Mhm.
like, whoa, it was controversial. Like it's just like hand claps, like the situation has changed, which I think is great because it feels like there's more capacity for nuance and paradox maybe in the
Yeah.
field than there had been.
I'm so glad about that. I'm still wondering, like I'm curious about what changed because if we can notice what it was, then we can also maximize that. We can bring Jupiter into the picture and
Yes.
be like, how can we expand what's
Like
going
that
right here?
fountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I agree. For me, I feel like the fountain of paradox is like a fountain that just keeps on giving. It's endlessly fascinating for me.
I love that you love paradox. It's so life-giving. It's such a service to all of us. I don't always have as much faith in it as you do. Like I do on the deep level, but I'm like in practice, it is hard,
It
you know.
is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I love is that to me the zodiac, I feel that the zodiac is about as exquisite a design as that there is. Like to me, it
Mm.
is just forever a fascinating design. And inherent are those 90-degree angles that are all the paradoxes. You know, it's like built in
Oh,
through the
wow.
zodiac. And
Yeah.
so it it just shows that to me that how inherent paradox is. And there's like a way to lovingly hold that through the language.
Yes. Does anything come to mind recently for you that embodies that's an example of embodying paradox that we can chew on? I know that you teach about this a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think this offer that you have is teasing at one, which is that the paradox of like I want to receive,
Mm.
but I also want to feel like someone who gives. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
and this is a false paradox.
Of course.
That shame creates false couplings. That's how it's like
Oh,
mechanics
wow.
work. Um, and so
Yes.
it's like to me, unshaming is very fun because we get to like look for all the false couplings.
Yes. That's so beautiful.
Does that
Yes,
resonate?
totally. I was thinking about, yeah, I guess that's a big part of our worldview is are these false couplings. We've been taught, all these different sayings uh about what's possible for us. There's the whole I can't think of any of them right now, but and okay, wait. I've lost the I've lost the plot. You can't take this part out, right? I'm like
Yes, totally.
I totally agree with what you're just saying, and I was like, maybe I can connect it to this other thing, and I was like, no, I can't. Um, yeah, okay. I would love to come up with an example of a false paradox, though, because it's like, um, yeah.
I think another, I mean, one that I see a lot is that authenticity is consistency. Like that we
Mm,
have to stay consistent to be authentic. And I think that's a real disservice to us because then we will mute and choose to not see where we're inconsistent and like how we show up. So
yeah,
then we're not able to act from the authenticity of the present moment because we're like trying to hold to like, I am this way and I'm
right.
trying to stay authentic so that the person I'm interacting with isn't uncomfortable with my inconsistency.
Totally. That's actually something that comes up so much in reclaiming traditional cultures, especially of Europe, and is in the course as well, is this idea of a fixed identity that we're one thing and that we're always going to be that thing, and that thing is going to be discernible to other people in language that they understand, like, for example, that you're Swedish, and therefore, as a Swedish person of genetic heritage, you have a right to certain cultural things that other people don't have a right to. But then because you're white, you're also not allowed to do this other thing. And it's like, it's not real. Do you know? I mean, of course, all of these little ethnicity facts are relevant in terms of our relationship to other people and in terms of our relationship to culture, but it's an incredibly alive and constantly changing and constantly redefined thing, which may or may not matter. Like, do you really know what it means to be Swedish? Are we doing blood tests? are you allowed to dance around the midsummer pole? Because I don't know, you don't have blonde hair or whatever it is. Like it goes both ways. Like we're trying so hard to undo whiteness and worrying about appropriating and appropriately other people's cultures, but at the same time, we're still living by those same rules and believing in them. Do you know? Like,
Mhm,
and that's one of the biggest
mhm.
challenges of this work is like we can't we can't heal this fantasy of whiteness without actually calling its bluff at some point and being like, race doesn't exist. That's one of the bigger,
Yeah.
harder sort of paradoxes. It's like we can't, and this may be an actual paradox where it's like we can't heal whiteness without deconstructing it first, or at the same time.
This is so good. Because I think feel like this is an example of a paradox that for me, um, it's like it's not so much that it's false because whiteness is real, but it's also
Mhm.
not real.
Exactly. It's a
And like
cultural
how to
construct.
hold that because like I think if you
Mhm.
go into all the way into one, then there's
Mhm.
something kind of missing in the magic. And it's really about like creating a
Mhm.
third way
Mhm.
where both of these are real and we trust that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We're not trying to resist. We're like, what's
Uh-huh.
here and how can we move into greater complexity with it?
Yeah.
Not in denial of like harm, not in denial of what we've all agreed makes sense to some degree, like, national boundaries, for example. We want to make sense to one another and we want to address what's here in its pain and in its positive elements, but also be moving into deeper ways of seeing it and moving into greater flexibility with it instead
Mm.
of just getting stuck and being like, oh, I have to be this one thing now because it's my saving grace somehow. I don't know why. For some reason now I'm stuck being Swedish. It's a, and it's not enough. Um yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Danica. So Abundance Paganism begins
It
pretty
begins just,
soon, yeah?
yeah, July 1st, and the doors close June 30th so that everything can come out, sail out on the waves on July 1st to folks. And on July 23rd to 29th, there is a mini course as well that I'm running over email that's free just for anybody. And there's already, I don't know, 500 or something people in there, which is so exciting. It's so
Oh
sweet.
my God,
So
that's
you're in good
amazing.
company if you want to join that. You can join in the middle of it. It doesn't matter. And I'll share a link with you to that. But yes, Abundance Paganism itself runs from August, I mean, through July and August through the beginning of September, and it's all delivered by audio podcast. But then there's all the activities and readings if you like to do them, and meditations for each. And there's 2 live calls where we'll be processing what people are working through with me. And it's a wild bundle of abundance that I tried to span out so it wasn't quite too overwhelming over a couple of months. But I like the concentration of it too, just going right into
Mhm.
the portal. I think there's potency to keeping something concise to a degree as well. Yeah,
Anything else you want to share that you've got going on this year, upcoming?
that's a good question. Um, uh, I don't know actually. I don't know what I'm gonna do
Fun.
yet.
Fun.
Yeah.
And I would love to encourage listeners to subscribe to your writings. Is that
Right, of
Substack?
course. Yes, I Substack. I have a Substack called Enthusiastica, and I send out posts almost every week. And there's a paid subscribers area where folks get a post every month that's just for them. It's like a Q&A post, and they get audio recordings of all of the emails that I send out as well there. It's very active, actually, I would say. Enthusiastica at Substack is the place to follow me for sure. If you're not wanting to follow me on Instagram or Fairfoot Podcast, which are also legitimate and active places to find me. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you so much for coming back, Danica. This was so fun.
It was such a pleasure, and thank you for letting me talk your ear entirely off. I
My pleasure.
have a lot of enthusiasm.
Thank you so much, Danica. Thank you for coming back to Moon. So fun to see you. Listeners, you can connect with Danica's writings and presence on Instagram through links in the show notes. And if you're receiving this before July 1st, inviting you to please go check out Abundance Paganism if this conversation got you really excited and you're resonating with Danica's voice and you want to hop into that experience. You can also learn about getting into the free mini course later in July that Danica is running. So there's lots of options for you there, and I hope that it feels like treasure for you. Thank you so much, listeners. If you've never left a review or a rating for Moon to Moon, inviting you to do that now. If you love this place, it really helps folks find me. I really love to read them and receive them. So thank you so much. And until then, wishing y'all a beautiful week and a gorgeous new moon in Cancer if you're listening to this right around when it's published. All right. Cheers.